Okay, thank you. Tonight, the meeting of the school committee of February 16th, the meeting will come to order. Mr. Lesnick, have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Abraze?
Present.
Mr. Barrows?
Present.
Mayor DiMaria?
Here.
Ms. Cardello?
Here.
Ms. Lambert?
Present.
Mr. LaMonica?
Here.
Ms. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Panarisi?
Here.
Ms. Sarni? Mr. Parker?
Here. 8 present from the school committee, along with the mayor. Ms. Sani cannot make tonight's meeting. Please all rise and salute the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, now turn this over to the superintendent, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So item number 3 is the reading of the records from February 1st, 2021.
I'll move to waive the reading of the records and place it on file.
Second.
Okay, the motion is made and seconded to waive the reading and place on file. Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. Okay, 9 in the affirmative. We have waived and placed on file.
So much. Item number 4 is public comment.
I make a motion to open public comment.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is made and seconded to open up for public comment. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. 9 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. We open for public comment.
All right, give me 1 second.
Hello, it's Shane and Lincoln McNally. Am I coming in loud and clear?
Very much so, Mr. McNally.
Anyway, I'll proceed. Hopefully you're all hearing me nice and loud. So Shane and Lincoln McNally here. We're parents of 3 Everett public school students, 5th grade, 7th.
I believe we can't hear anything.
I concur.
Pulse vaccines have been administered to all school staff. I've spoken to many of you and a lot of people in the last few weeks about this plan. And one thing that's come up many, many times has been blame. A lot of blame has been placed from all sides. I think what I would encourage you to do before voting on anything tonight,
Gage, it's going in and out, so we're not really hearing.
I know his internet's bad. He keeps cutting out.
our professionals. Am I still okay? Can you hear me?
Can we let them know we haven't heard really much of anything?
I'll keep trying. Hopefully you're hearing me okay. I was just saying that I think it would be helpful to get proper feedback from all your teachers, well, as many as you can. That would include preschool teachers, specialists, special education, English language learners. The reason for this is quite simple, is that a lot of you have spoken about going back to school for kids' social emotional learning, the academic needs, and that's perfectly valid. But I think the best people to speak about that would be your educators. And I think there's room for improvement in terms of hearing from them in different ways. And furthermore, I think, they've got the best contact with your families. So a lot's been made of English language learning families, and nobody cares more about them than us. But I think there's a way in which I would avoid oversimplifying the views of the immigrant community. They come from a wide variety of countries, backgrounds, cultures. And again, I think there's so many ways to solicit that input, formal, informal, high-tech, low-tech, that you can at your disposal. I'd strongly encourage you. It might be slower, but you'll be a thorough, better, more collaborative process. To that end, I offer my support. As much anything I can do to help, I'm here. You have an amazing Lenka McNally, one of the most amazing women in Everett, who's here to help you out too. So don't hesitate to get in touch. Just finish. In closing, I'll say, in teaching, you talk about using a wide variety of data sources to inform your instruction. I think I'd encourage you to do the same with this process. I think, and the best people is your educators. Many of you have spoken about how this is a great community, collaborative community. So then I think, use this, that's at your disposal. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. And for the record, Mr. McNally lives on PSA.
Currently, no one else is waiting for public comment.
Motion made to end public comment.
A second.
Okay, motion been made and seconded to end public comment. Questions on that? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Close public comment.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes, 9 yeas, 0 nays. We'll close public comment.
Thank you. So item number 5 is the report of the superintendent. So we'll start with the superintendent's update as we usually do. So to everyone this evening and to all our students and teachers, I hope that everybody's February vacation is off to a safe and enjoyable start, and that everybody has a great rest of their week, and that we look forward to seeing everyone when we resume our regular schedule on February 22nd. The majority of tonight's update does relate to our continued efforts to launch hybrid learning, hopefully as soon as this time next month. The environment and indicators for in-person learning continue to improve. So last week, the CDC released its much anticipated and updated guidance for school reopening, which includes particularly pointed advice on how the vaccine should factor into our planning. The CDC does report that, or their report does bring clarity to our planning, and it should help us to sort of push onward with bringing students back to class. Similarly, Everett's COVID-19 metrics, which have long been the biggest reasons for our very prudent approach to reopening, have shown further signs of flattening and declining. From the daily incidence rates to our percent positivity. And so we have much to discuss today, but first, To begin tonight's update, I want to start the way I generally start, which is with some bright spots. So throughout this unprecedented school year, I did want to highlight our EPS art educators who have been really successful in helping our students pursue their passions, even through traditional and digital forms of expression. So the results have been really creative, very impressive. Off the top, we have to applaud Everett High School senior Darren Pierre, who earned a silver key in this year's Scholastic Art Awards. Darren was recognized for his artwork, which is here entitled Desolation. It's an acrylic on canvas that is shown. And we expect to see more from Darren in the coming years as he continues to hone his considerable skills at Montserrat College of Art. In the next slide, you're going to see a 2-minute video that highlights some of the other grades that are happening in our art classes. So at the Cavarian School, teacher Carolyn DeChico has been helping 8th graders make portrait drawings by using their observational skills. 7th graders have studied and used symbolism in works inspired by surrealism. 6th graders are studying world architecture and transforming 2D drawings into 3D sculptures. And at the Parlin School, we have art teachers Lindsay Zaremba and Jill Enos, who developed a gallery walk featuring work from different grade levels. So 3rd graders created abstract drawings, 4th graders made winter snow globes and digital snowflakes with a focus on symmetry. They've studied, foreground, middle ground, made polar bear and snowman drawings. And the 5th and 6th graders have also learned about symmetry by creating digital symmetrical snowflakes. They've done winterscapes and pop art mug drawings inspired by an artist. And they've studied color theory to design warm and cool hand drawings. And then in the grades 7 and 8, they have made name drawings using pattern, contrast, and they studied monochromatic warm and cool analogous and complementary colors as part of a color scheme square lesson. So these are just some of the examples that you're going to see this evening. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what you're about to see. Thank you so much. So in another bright spot, we wanted to give a quick shout out to the folks at ExxonMobil's Everett terminal for awarding the Everett Public Schools with a generous donation as part of its expansive Good Neighbor Grant program. So it was a pleasure. I got to meet the terminal supervisor, Dean Cockle, at the Exxon's facility on Beecham Street. And so I just wanted to thank the ExxonMobil facility coordinator, Mary Martell, for all of her help organizing the donation. On behalf of the Everett Public Schools, I wanted to thank all of them for their continued support of our students. So now on to some of our metrics. So as I was mentioning before, we are wanting to talk about the relaunching of schools, and our desire to reopen schools is driven by the encouraging news from the CDC and from our Everett positivity numbers, which I will get to. However, it is also driven by worries for social emotional welfare of students, which is a significant worry that's growing and sort of exacerbating as the weeks and the months are passing. But academically also, we are seeing the first tangible signs of the limits of remote learning as it relates to student achievement. Right here, you can see in our district-wide K-8 results from the most recent round of iReady assessment testing. These were released last week. And this preliminary data should be accounted for as we consider, how to approach the remainder of the school year. So I would characterize these results we are sharing tonight as neither, terribly alarming, but also not overly encouraging, even allowing for the obvious variables of the school year. So while I sincerely do believe that we are making the very best of an untenable situation, there are limits to the effectiveness of remote learning for some of our students. And so these scores just serve to remind us that, nothing, no matter how determined and creative the alternative, is a worthy substitute for in-person teaching and learning, especially for some of our learners. And, we've always known this to be true. And so now we are starting to see some data that actually reaffirms that. And of course, I do want to qualify that testing is but one measure of a district's success. And, and so it demands careful analysis, but, also a proper frame of reference, knowing that it's just one measure. But the test results during a global pandemic, should certainly be met with caution, but they are still, a reflection of what we are seeing in our classrooms. So these test figures fully reflect the efforts our teachers and students are making in a very difficult environment. And again, I have no regrets about how we have approached the school year to this point. And if our most recent iReady data is one of the trade-offs from our restrained approach, I think that was still, again, the right approach for us to take. But while transitioning to hybrid will not be quick and easy and will not immediately erase the gaps that have started to form in the recent months, I do believe that it is a significant first step in addressing some of the academic shortfalls that some of our students are experiencing. So as is the case with the social and emotional factors, we have to honestly consider this academic data and do what we can to reverse it. And I do believe that seeing our students return to class will help kickstart that process. So for those who may not know, the EPS uses a testing system known as iReady to assess math and reading skills for students in kindergarten through 8th grade. So we completed our winter testing just this past week, and we have developed a district-wide snapshot here to share with you. On this slide, you have two tables showing what are called math and reading placements from 2020 in green and 2021 in blue. So looking at math, the biggest concern is that a greater proportion of our students are 2 or more grade levels below where they should be. Last year, 21.5% of our K-8 students fell into this category. This year, the figure has jumped to a shade under 30%. So the percentage of students who are at or above grade level in math has also fallen from 32% to less than 27%. The reading placement figures are more consistent year to year, which is a positive, given that we have been in remote since September, or rather last March. In fact, we have seen a small increase in the percentage of students who are at or above grade level, which is great. However, on the other hand of that, more of our students have fallen 2 or more grade levels behind as compared to this point last year. And so this could be demonstrative of, a widening gap. Again, it's just one measure, but it's certainly one that we want to keep our eyes on. In this next slide, whereas the previous slide shows the overall placement of our students, this next slide uses the same data to demonstrate how individual student placement changed from year to year. So as you can see, the majority of students saw no change in their reading or math placement. So while some did show progress, approximately a quarter of our students regressed in reading and or math compared to where they were last year. So the percentage of students showing progress dipped from 9% to 6%. So this is the second year that EPS has utilized district-wide iReady testing, which means we can't show what progress looks like under regular learning conditions, unfortunately. So we don't have historical data to look at. So that is definitely a shortfall of this data that I want to mention. It does, however, provide us at least one benchmark from last year from which to measure our future results. So our look at all of the iReady data is going to be ongoing, and we will share any and all useful information during our future meetings and during our future interim testing. In addition, we also do use a testing system called Edmentum at the high school level. Those results we are currently breaking down to present to you as soon as possible. Again, we'll break that down to see what the disparities are among our different student subgroups as well. So I always like to give an attendance update. So our latest update on attendance shows that the last 4 weeks have yielded the best rates of the year at 95% of our, as 95% of our students have been participating in remote education. So the chart on the right shows a decrease in daily absences, highlighting a steep drop after some initial difficulties that we had in September. As of the 94th day of school, those with attendance rates from 90 to 100% remain consistent. I think every time I present, it's around 5,600 students who fall into those two best categories. And again, it is our hope that transitioning to more in-person instruction will help engage those students who, despite consistently aggressive outreach efforts, which we have been continuing throughout the year, they have been less connected than their peers during remote learning. So even though overall this does signal, great results in attendance of our remote learning, that small population of students that hasn't been attending remains consistent. And despite our outreach efforts, we haven't been able to there's a small portion that we haven't been able to really re-engage. So switching to COVID-19 data, Everett continues to see a rise in total cases, but again, this is cumulative. So like most communities, we are seeing though that the curve is showing signs of flattening. So as of February 11th, there were more than 7,000 positive cases in Everett, and we're hopeful that we have seen the end of the surge we experienced from Thanksgiving through January. So far this month, Everett's daily cases are trending downwards to the single digits, as you'll see in this next slide. So here we show sort of the daily ups and downs of the confirmed cases among our Everett residents. And these numbers continue to bounce around fairly dramatically, as you can see, but the floor and ceiling are also dropping over time. So in recent days, the numbers have risen to 40 and have not risen to 40 and have regularly fallen to even below 20. So more impressively, though, again, the green line shows the very steady and noticeable overall decline we have been seeing in daily cases since the end of January. So this chart shows the sharpest decline of two key metrics we've been tracking for several months now, which is the daily incidence rate and the percent positivity. So as you can see, the drop off is very noticeable and dramatic. So last week, in fact, our average daily incidence rate dropped to 5%. And as you can see here, Everett's improving numbers put us at 39th among the Bay State communities that are in the red zone. So during every previous school committee meeting where we have presented this chart, Everett has generally been inside the top 10 or top 15 among red cities. So this is a huge improvement. And it's impossible for us to not be heartened by these statistics, not just in school, but in the overall community. And, you know, we also don't want to lose sight of all of the things that have made these statistics a reality. You know, for example, the consistent use of face coverings and physical distancing. You know, I know the increased testing and now and awareness. So as we begin to look at reopening our schools, I think it is a good time too to remind our families that self-screening is an essential part of our mitigation efforts, as is the distancing and the masking, and it is clearly showing that it's working. And so we're very encouraged by that. And again, for those students who are already in our buildings, we always just want to remind everyone that if you know you are symptomatic, if your student is symptomatic, to remember to please keep them home, consult with your doctor or health professional, because again, I think this is what's helping our numbers overall in the community go down and will make it easier for us to return to school. So I mentioned the new CDC guidance. So last week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released updated guidance that was aimed at facilitating the rapid reopening of schools. So the framework meshes with our thinking and does help school systems answer sort of these intense calls to get students back into class. So we did obviously look very closely at this guidance, and for us, the biggest takeaway from the report is that the CDC is not affixing specific positivity metrics to a district's ability to reopen. You know, so that, which is helpful because then we are not trying to chase a set number or wait to plunge below a designated threshold before we proceed. So the CDC does allow for a reasonable level of assertiveness in reopening schools. Also, as part of its report, the CDC released its own color-coded system for categorizing counties. So Middlesex County is in the highest category, red, although Everett's metrics are currently a level above that in what is labeled orange. So nevertheless, schools in areas designated red may still consider a limited reopening as long as they can layer multiple safety strategies on in the classroom. And again, this is in lockstep with what we are trying to accomplish here in Everett. And again, that is, you know, sort of a phased reopening in which we waterfall students back to class by grade level under a hybrid plan. So according to the CDC too, elementary classrooms can operate in person at any level of community virus transmission with sufficient mitigation, again, such as masking, physical distancing, all of those safety measures that we've put in place. The document further states that middle and high schools can safely operate in person at any level of community spread if they conduct weekly coronavirus testing of students and staff members. So again, this is all very positive because these recommendations do not conflict with anything that we have been considering. The CDC blueprint, and I'm sure everybody has seen this in the news, does not list vaccination as a key consideration for reopening, but instead labels vaccines as an additional layer of the COVID-19 prevention. So to quote the CDC director, safe reopening does not suggest that teachers need to be vaccinated. So the report also references a CDC science brief, which says that based on available data, in-person learning in schools has not been associated with substantial community transmission. So overall, the report is very heavy on practical recommendations that are aligned with the reopening plan we've developed and that we developed and approved actually last summer. So from guidance on the ventilation to shared spaces to water fountains, classroom designs, you know, CDC's operational strategy really does reflect our planning and what we have seen from districts that have successfully launched hybrid plans. And again, while the CDC guidance is not a mandate, it is undeniably useful. You know, the CDC has been one of the foremost guiding forces throughout the pandemic. So its information is based on science, data, common sense. And in summarizing it, I would echo the sentiments of Randy Weingarten, the president of the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, who called the new guidelines informed and rigorous. So after looking through them, I do believe them to be, appropriate, but still with an eye on safety. So during our last meeting, we did express profound disappointment that the state halted our ambitious vaccination plans in the city of Everett. But especially for our school system specifically, and we do continue to hope that our educators across the Commonwealth, not just in Everett, will have the chance to be vaccinated sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, all of us, including our young students, should take heart in seeing that so many of our oldest residents received the COVID-19 vaccine through the work of City Hall. So, the successful clinics that Everett has been holding for residents age 75 and older, are absolutely relevant, I think, to the reopening of schools. During our February 1st school committee meeting, the Everett Teachers Association did speak passionately about multi-generational households, where the threat of individuals contracting COVID-19 is especially high. And this is a very valid concern. Students who live with grandparents or older relatives are rightfully concerned about bringing COVID-19 home from school. So, seeing those relatives receive the vaccination is a huge relief, and could help being a deciding factor in whether or not they do accept the chance to take part in hybrid learning. And again, while it's not our educators themselves, it is a step towards, building up that herd immunity over time. As we just discussed, the CDC indicates that vaccinations are highly desirable, again, but not essential to reopening the schools. But even as we push ahead with whatever our plan is in regards to hybrid learning, we are not going to quiet our calls for educators to be prioritized by the state and its vaccine rollout. And as this slide shows, which you've seen last time as well, 73% of the respondents to the ETA survey indicated that they would get vaccinated. And I think this is an interesting and encouraging data point. I also wanted to just commend the city for continuing to think of us as it makes its vaccine plans. The state did recently announce that it is subtly changing its prioritization requirements to give cities a little bit of discretion in ensuring, the doses do not go to waste. So to that end, we'll be able to work with City Hall. They've asked us to create a standby list of EPS personnel who might be able to secure spots during the next clinic. And again, the top priority still continues to be our residents 75 and older, our residents 65 and older, with 2 comorbidities in the next group. Still, while this likely means that opportunities for our staff will be limited, it is still hopefully a sign of, again, expanding the accessibility to the vaccine. And we will share more information with our educators as we receive it. So, as we've stated before, Everett is uniquely situated, and we must always make our decisions with, with what is right for us here in Everett. So that being said, we also do not exist in a bubble, and it is important for us to at least understand the context of what is happening around us and the kind of access that other districts may be providing to their students and families. It was cited, I think, this past weekend by the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents that 2/3 of school districts have some form of in-person instruction for their general education population. On this slide, you'll see, information from a survey of the North Shore Superintendents Roundtable, which is made up of 29 school districts in our area. And so while some of these districts are very different from our own, some are very similar. So this gives us kind of an interesting cross-section of those that are in our general region. According to the survey results released this month, the majority of districts who responded to the survey are in a hybrid model. At the elementary level, the percentage is 61%, and that number climbs to more than 70% in middle and high school. Conversely, the percentage of districts who reported being in a fully remote model are at around 10% or lower. So as such, again, this sampling seems to be consistent with that report of 2/3 of districts providing some level of hybrid learning at this time. So we reached the point clearly where we need to give intense consideration to the social and emotional well-being of our students. I know we've brought that up quite a bit. All of the improving COVID-19 metrics that we shared earlier are as encouraging as they are, do not, kind of assuage our growing concern around issues such as isolation, extended separation from school-based routines, and the comfort that these routines provide to our students. So there are countless reasons why students do need the chance to go back to school, many of which, have just as much to do with their social emotional well-being as with their academics, and have everything to do with their overall happiness and health. So the statistics on this front range from upsetting to kind of dire, and they must be accounted for as, again, we kind of hammer out a workable hybrid plan. So the next two slides highlight just some of the growing amount of data available to us to confront and consider. According to, again, information provided by the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, a recent survey heeded the following 4 insights based on data analysis. So the first, one, student mental health challenges are acute and getting worse. So specifically, 83% of educators surveyed reported observing moderate to severe mental health challenges with students, with 71% reporting that challenges are somewhat worse or significantly worse than a year ago. The second insight is that educators are struggling as much as students. So 84% reported observing moderate to severe mental health challenges with staff, with 85% reporting the challenges are somewhat worse or significantly worse than 1 year ago. The third insight is that districts are relying on a multi-pronged approach to address student mental health issues. So 67% reported that they've implemented a social emotional learning curriculum for students, and 56% offered mental health targeted professional development for teachers. And 49% reported adding counseling, clinical, and therapeutic support to their school communities. And then the fourth insight that has been gleaned from this data is that there are significant challenges and gaps in the mental health safety net that do still exist. So 77% were concerned about worsening conditions for students with existing mental health issues, and 69% were concerned about students presenting with mental health issues who weren't previously on the school's radar screen. And not only do we have to acknowledge this data, we need to, pull it from the background, to the foreground as well. The emotional distress that COVID-19 is causing is very real. And we should consider what we can do to alleviate it as much as we can, as soon as we can. So this slide includes some powerful testimonials that highlight the type of bottom line findings that experts are reporting. So in addition, data from the Centers for Disease Control shows that there has been a 24% increase over the last year in emergency visits for mental health issues among 5 to 11-year-olds, and a 31% surge among 12 to 17-year-olds. And this is not to suggest that successfully addressing the social and emotional needs of our students is achieved by, flipping a switch, going from remote to hybrid. Social and emotional learning is a critical part of what we do every day under any circumstances. So it will have to be an especially ambitious part of our curriculum when we return all our students. And we also already have a current grant that we're working on and plans to support this even in the remote environment. That said, again, I do have no doubt that hybrid learning will have a meaningfully positive impact on our students who do want to come back to school as soon as possible. So at some stage, we need to take in all the information available to us and give it some sort of coherence and purpose. So we can't let these factors, continue to sort of swirl around without kind of corralling them and molding them into a plan. So this slide is meant to kind of give you a visual of our thinking of taking all of this information in. So we have various things to weigh and objectives to meet. So externally, we have the advice from organizations such as the CDC, the Mass Department of Public Health, the Everett Board of Health, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, to consider in conjunction with the latest COVID-19 metrics. We also have to give voice to our families, whether it is in the form of survey results or feedback from public meetings and gatherings. And layered on top of all of this is the physical safety of our students and staff, and the continued need to ensure that essential health precautions are being vigorously and consistently followed. And then we have to make the critical determination about how to use all of this information to best meet the academic and social emotional needs of our students. And this is not easy, nor does it mean reaching a consensus on every single question relating to our reopening. But, we are aiming to be decisive and confident that we are properly at least assessing the situation as it stands right now, and that we are acting in the best overall interests of the EPS. So in simplest terms, the data we have before us, when considered holistically, clearly directs us to move away from the cautious approach we have taken to this point, and to start to pursue a path that brings students and teachers back to class under a hybrid model. So after careful consideration and much debate, we've developed three options for returning to school that are highlighted on this slide. So keep in mind that much of the work needed for our hybrid learning has already been completed. So this ranges from, again, for the procurement of the PPE, cleaning supplies, to checking and rechecking the air quality of our buildings, configuring our spaces to accommodate 6 feet of social distancing. So, I believe that our buildings are ready to welcome back our students. We just have to determine when. And to answer that question, we must make a fundamental decision on how to factor the vaccine into our return as it previously was. So all three of these plans call for our students to come back in a tiered fashion. We will return students based on need and grade level. So doing that slow transition in with the aim of bringing back all of our students, hopefully this year, for in-person classes. So again, regardless of which option, we do know that we are going to take the approach in that same transitional way that we've been discussing. The difference in the plan, again, relates to the availability of the vaccine, which we have seen to be outside of our control, and which we now see from the CDC is not necessarily needed to open schools. So under Plan 1, we would begin to waterfall students back to school beginning on March 15th, regardless of how widely available the vaccine is. Under Plan 2, we would wait for teachers and staff to receive the first dose, which means our start date would not be until sometime in April. And then Plan 3 calls for teachers and staff to receive both doses, which means we would not launch a hybrid model until sometime in May. So Plan 1 obviously has the substantial advantage of allowing us to set a date and throw all of our support behind it. This would put us on a reasonably fast track in which we will finalize our hybrid protocols and guidelines, determine how many students are going to opt in or stick with remote learning, determine which grades will return first. All of this would unfold quickly, efficiently, and we'd be able to provide you with a final update at our next school committee meeting. I believe this is our best option. It is the best sort of manifestation of what we presently, again, have sort of filtered in all the information about the pandemic and schools and what we know our students and families need from us. Neither Plan 2 nor 3 does give us the luxury of setting a start date, which does mean our parents would be unable to make firm plans surrounding work and family schedules. We would also leave ourselves open to any variables regarding the vaccine at a time of year when delays are growing more and more taxing. If this year has shown us anything, it's that even those plans laid out by the state are subject to change and will then impact our plans here in Everett. So while we've assigned Plan 2 and 3 with date ranges, I want to still qualify that those are our best guesses based on the information we have regarding when phase 2 of the vaccination will end. And having an appropriate supply of vaccine. So that then would hopefully put us in April. Still, Plan 2, if that is your preference, does offer some middle ground if everything goes according to plan regarding the state's vaccine rollout, and if our teachers do receive that first dose by the end of March, as per the state's current plan. Plan 3 is a little bit more difficult, and and harder when it comes to helping our families who are currently asking for in-person learning. So this would push us into May, leaving little time to make meaningful impact on our students. Our community has dealt with a tremendous amount of uncertainty during the pandemic, and the patience and the understanding of our families has really been beyond generous. And this includes families who've been long ready for our hybrid learning model to start. So after several weeks of emerging information and these altered trends, not to mention, hours of, debate and consideration, I do unquestionably believe that the time is right to put our hybrid plan to work for our students who want it. Obviously, I'm as anxious or interested in hearing from all of you, but I do feel it is my responsibility to clearly state what I believe is my recommendation. And I do believe that Plan 1 adheres to our unyielding attempts to do what is best for our students and families at this particular moment in time. So lastly, before I open the floor for discussion around those three options, I did want to let our families know that regardless of which option is chosen by the school committee and which is then subsequently negotiated with the union, we will be offering families the hybrid Q&A session starting next week that will be facilitated by building principals and assistant principals to provide families with more information about hybrid learning. So even if we are unable at that time to answer all questions, especially as we again negotiate some of those finer points with our union, we do believe it is important for families to hear from us and our school leaders regarding the information that we do have, which is considerable. So we'll be dividing the Zoom session into 30-minute language sections too. So this resource is available for all of our families, and family liaisons will be on the Zoom to translate questions and responses from our school leaders. So this week we'll be publishing a resource too with the explanation of the basic tenets of hybrid instruction, cohort characteristics and schedules and safety protocols, all of the things that have already, been confirmed, and all of our updated safety protocols are also currently available on our website, which we encourage parents to review these if they have questions about sanitizing, our face covering policy, and more important procedures we put in place to mitigate risks once we return. Building leaders will again be able to answer specific questions based on the layout of their buildings, entrances, exits, outdoor spaces, and special populations, and other questions that families might have at these particular Q&As. So in closing, I bring us back to that previous slide. I would like to open up for any questions as well as discussion regarding our options for return. And item number 2 on the agenda too is to approve the revised reopening plan, which does require a vote from this body. So before I return to formal negotiations with the union, with our finance and negotiations subcommittee, I do think that it's essential to know where this committee stands regarding our plan for return. And I do want to remind everyone again that whatever is decided here is also still not final until we have negotiated it with the union.
Okay, we're going to open this up for questions of the superintendent.
Yes, please.
Okay, with that, I have Mrs. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Madam Superintendent. So what is the timeline from, you mentioned the start of a tiered reentry. What does that look like time-wise from beginning to end?
So we wouldn't be able to necessarily tell you the end because we do want to go slow and kind of steadily. March 15th would be when we would start. We think there's like a 3-week at least initial entry. So March 15th would start our special education sub-separate classes and some of our English learners. The next week would be K-2, potentially 12. And again, these will all be discussed with the union, and then after that we would like to do 3 to 5. However, again, we are committed to in that time doing what we've been doing, which is closely watching the numbers and making sure that we are still going in the right direction before we start expanding to more grades. So it would be 3 weeks minimum transition time, and that's just for K to 5. So it would be 4 or more. So it still takes us into, you know, April and May, which is a great question, because then again, the transition time itself, if we're starting sometime in April, then takes us into May for some grades.
And likewise for tier 3, if we begin reentry in May, some grades may not come back.
Yes, I would imagine it would be at that point, we would have some students that wouldn't return, because it wouldn't be useful to have them come in for 1 or 2 weeks. Again, that would be up for discussion at that point. Maybe it's better to have them come in for 2 weeks than nothing. But it does seem like what we're trying to get at right now, which is increased instruction and touch points with the students, wouldn't really be achieved in the 2 weeks.
And just 2 more questions. Can we require anybody going back to participate in pool testing? So students, I know parents have to approve it, but can we require that it be approved in order for them to return?
So we do have some ability, again, dependent on the model that we use, to have some pool testing required for return. If we were doing a full in-person return, of course, of 100% students, that would be a different conversation altogether. However, as we are having some students return and others not, we do have some flexibility in being able to require some testing.
Okay. And is there a way, and I don't know if you would know this, is there a way for us to find out what percentage of educators may have gotten vaccinated in the meantime, whether through the companion program or, you know, through having another, I know some are classified as direct care because of other certifications. Can we find out that number or?
Yeah, yes, we definitely can. We don't have that number now, but as we're even creating our standby list, we're contacting who we have sort of prioritized in order. And so I'm sure there's an efficient way we can work with the local Department of Public Health to get that list, but we'll also be speaking with those folks as well. So if they've already had the vaccine, they wouldn't be wanting to get a second dose of the first vaccine.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Apperzage, did you have your hand up?
I did, Mr. Parker. Thank you. Madam Superintendent, I guess my question is, because there were a lot of numbers in terms of the vaccine, and it seemed back when we were talking, a lot of the options were sort of prioritized around our educators getting the vaccine. But I've got a cold slap in the face from where I work, where we have a horrible situation where the COVID is tearing through the prisons, yet a large majority of our prison staff refuses to get the vaccine, even though it's being offered to them. I am not one of those people. I'm going for my second shot this Friday. But I guess the question becomes that where our initial focus seemed to be vaccine for the educators, but at the same time, when I looked at the questionnaire, it was, I believe, 10% said no to the vaccine of the people that responded. And there were additional people who said for medical reasons, they weren't going to get the vaccine. And of course, the numbers did not reflect, obviously, our entire education population that we have. So I just want to put out there the fact that I know we discussed in terms of the vaccine, but the fact is that in our society as a whole, in places much more confining than schools, people are still refusing to get the vaccine, and they're going to work and going on with life. I mean, that is a reality. So I just, not really a question, but I just, I guess your thoughts in terms of when we looked at those numbers about, quite frankly, the fact that I believe it was just with the numbers we had, about a quarter of our educators weren't going to have no intention of getting the vaccine. Your thoughts on that, and where do we go from here with that?
So based on some of the statistics we've heard about like first responders, I think that what we got on that survey was actually kind of encouraging as far as the percentage of educators that do want the vaccine. So that's part of why I wanted to show that, because I do think it's interesting. I do think it shows that our educators, perhaps, I mean, we won't know until after the vaccine is administered, are more motivated to get the vaccine. The 73%, there was a 10% as well that it's really dependent upon, sorry, let me look back. It was dependent upon, so some were no due to medical reasons, and then there was about 10 to 15% that were yes, pending approval of their doctor, because many have to get approval of their doctor. So once you include the yes, pending approval, you actually get to about 88%. I definitely agree with you. I mean, it still means it's not going to be 100%. So for those who are wanting to get vaccinated in order to come back to work, we do need to qualify it with the fact that all of your colleagues will also be vaccinated. So that is their choice at this point. So I do still think it's an important point to look at from both sides.
Thank you.
Ms. Cardello?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the superintendent. Very nice presentation, but I wish I only gave 2 options. Now I'm confused. But anyway, a few of my questions have been answered that my colleagues had asked. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how often are we checking and getting a result for the air quality in our buildings? Is it a weekly test, or how often are we doing it?
So we have a plan for testing based on the return of increased staff. So we're doing testing, and we've talked with the union too, and this is part of our discussions about where is being tested. Originally, we were thinking high touch areas, then we started to look at more classrooms. At this point, we our air quality is good. However, we need to really test it once we have more people in buildings. That's another nice byproduct of coming in and transitioning in slowly, because then we'll be able to then test those areas that now have students and staff in them that didn't before.
Okay. And when we know how often it's going to be done, the areas that are going to be done, we have the results. Is that something you would consider posting on our website so that everyone can view that, like parents and any stakeholders that are interested? Because I think that's a big concern. Once we do start bringing more people in, it does change everything. But as long as we're keeping up with it, Tom said there's a lot of places that have a lot more people in them than we will have in a hybrid situation. But I know people are concerned about that.
Yes, and I think that's a great point. We can figure out a way to make it more understandable, because I'll be honest, even the way it's measured, to me, it kind of looks like, I can't even decipher it. So I need a professional to tell me what are the ranges, so we can come up with like a color coding or something like that to make it more accessible to, the person who is not an HVAC expert. But I do think that that's a great point.
And one more question. Are we going to actually remove some furniture from our classrooms, or are we just going to cordon them off?
So we have done both. So we actually, it's interesting because all of the spaces are kind of different, and there are almost like 2 different modes of thought on this. There is the, remove all excess furniture, which all excess furniture that's not student desks has been removed. And so we do have some storage containers, things like that. But then there's even the student desk, which on one hand, you can have a full class of student desks. And that way, when you have cohort A and cohort B, they always go to their designated desk. So you would have a full class of desks, but you're only using half of them and every student gets their own designated one. Or you can have what you see more often in the visuals of different classrooms, which is much more spaced out desks. So in different spaces and in different schools, you know, principals have kind of made their determination. And then once we have teachers back in the buildings, they could certainly weigh in on that as well. We'd have made it so that we procured storage containers that can be placed on the property in the case that we do need to move more out than what we already have. But again, we want some of that to also be up to the teacher as to what works best with their style. Either way, whether it's all the desks or half the desks, we will still be following all the appropriate cleaning protocols that we would be following otherwise. But other than that, like when you're talking about the superfluous things that were in the classroom, yes, those have been removed and will not be in the classrooms.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Panarese, then Mrs. Murray.
Yeah, just a little follow-up to Mr. Abruzzes's answer. Unfortunately, Mr. Abruzze, even in the healthcare, the horrors I've seen in the past year working with COVID patients, you know, the small majority of healthcare workers still won't get the vaccine. So it's everywhere. It's not one particular group. It's a person's own choice. You know, that's their own personal choice, but it is a small group. And I think you're going to find it everywhere, unfortunately. I do believe it would be helpful if the teachers were able to get their first shot, because after a couple of weeks with the first shot, you're 95% protected. And I think that just helps. Even those, the ones who don't get it, it still protects a big majority of the employees, our educators. So, I mean, I'm sorry, but what I've seen, it's just, I'm in favor of hopefully they could get at least the first shot, and they're well protected after 2 weeks of getting the first shot. The second shot is basically a booster, you know, and that's just my opinion. I've seen the CDC flip-flop so many times this year. I don't know what to believe anymore. So I'm just a person who's in favor of getting that first shot. And I think the first shot's plenty protection for everybody. And I'd feel more safe, but it's, you know, I want to see what's best for the kids also too.
Mrs. Murray?
So to the superintendent through the chair, I had a couple of questions. I actually had three, but Mr. Panarese just answered probably the most pressing one, which is the efficacy of one dose. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Panarese. So my other two questions are first, and this is probably more about my personal experience having been teaching hybrid, is if we do start coming back in March, March still has some cold days. We're going to have windows open. My personal classroom, we've had a few pipes break. We've had it become, temperatures have plummeted. I don't know if it's appropriate for this body to be talking about this or if this is impact bargaining that would happen with the teachers union, but contingencies around cold days or having thermometers spaced out in classrooms to find out, you know, what the ambient temperature of the rooms is might be necessary if we are coming back when it's still cold in March. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, or if there have been any conversations about that. And then my second question is really from families, which is on for both families planning to keep their children remote and families planning to send their children back to hybrid. I've heard guardians and parents saying that they're worried about their child being stigmatized for the choices that they make as a family. So what can we do as a community? What can we do as a school committee? What can the ETA do? What can the city government do? How can we rally around our families and make sure that they feel confident that whatever decisions they're making for their children, they will not be stigmatized or marginalized or made to feel guilty about choosing what's best for what they need?
So to the first question about the temperature, so yeah, we have in our hybrid documents, we have some considerations for that. That's definitely something to speak to. That's part of the negotiations, like you mentioned. However, we will have, you know, those windows open. And so there will be temperature checks. We will be keeping a close eye on cold weather days, and making potentially some determinations from there based on how we see that impacts our classrooms. As far as the plan for remote, that is a great point. What I will say is that, you know, I think we're still in a community where it really is split down the middle. I know we have 55%, like in the survey that we gave, it's 55% that said that they would return and 45 that didn't. I mean, I still feel like it's pretty, I feel like we're going to see it on both sides. And I do hope that families do feel comfortable to do what's best for them. And because it is so split down the middle, I know that we're making every consideration that we can to ensure that it's an equitable experience for both groups. And again, when we're kind of looking at even the 55% that return, and that's why we're having this conversation, we've noticed that there are some trends in the students that we're finding and who may be the students who require extra in-person support right now, which is why we'd like to be able to provide access. But that extra point of access that we want to provide to those students who would be back in person should not take away from the access or opportunities that students who are remote, choosing to stay remote. So I think that's a great point, and that is a discussion we should keep open. I'm hoping that that will be less of an issue here because we've been hit so hard, and because we are still split so much that we'll find every kind of student and family in one quarter or the other, depending on, you know, just their own personal experiences.
Okay, so Mrs. Lamott.
Thank you, and I apologize, it just as I'm processing. You know, to Mr. Panarisi's point, my thinking was the first vaccine. Is there, so when we're looking at prioritization of maybe waitlisting educators, can we do the special ed and K through 2 so that it lines up a little more closely? Because, and I'll just explain personally,
We lost you.
sorry.
Oh, now we can hear you.
You can hear me? All right, I was gonna set up a hotspot on my phone. My thought process is that with special ed, EL, and pre-K through second grade, it's a small enough population that we can safely mitigate, right? So those classroom sizes are gonna be a lot smaller. But if we can get those educators kind of front loaded on any wait list, then, you know, the lineup almost works for the older grades, because the older grades are where I have more concerns. Just personally speaking, and from community feedback, my personal experience, the high school and even middle grades are my greater concern. So they would be last in the potential tier.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, even right now, as we're trying to do the priorities for this, the standby list, we're trying to figure out, okay, what is the appropriate priority? So for example, if you're looking at the Devon staff, since they're back in person, then you're looking at the staff that are in person and not teaching remotely. And then are we moving to, or then we moving to the Devon staff that are working remotely so that they can come in and work in person? Or are we then looking at the next set of special education teachers who are in person right now, or paras who are already in? So And then what about cafeteria workers? Are we including them in this priority or the next? So we've already been kind of grappling with some of these about, it's easy to do kind of like the first, second, and third. And then once you get from there, it's harder to kind of make those distinctions. I think your point is definitely one we haven't considered yet, because I will admit that when we've been thinking about it, we have been thinking about the transition into the buildings. So since we were going to transition K-2 first, we were thinking that those would, on a priority list of vaccinations, would be next. And so that's a really good point, and one that I think we need to consider. We haven't had that conversation, so we certainly will. And I think it's going to be something important to bring up with the union as well. In our previous plan, obviously, where you had like these big vaccination clinics where you could do everybody at once, that priority conversation got a lot less, we didn't have to be as granular about it. But right now, as we're thinking about handful of people on standby lists, I think we definitely need to get to that level of detail.
Thank you.
Mr. Barros.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Superintendent. It's more a suggestion than a question. You've mentioned, Superintendent, in your presentation, the family presentations that you are planning throughout our schools to inform families about the hybrid model. I believe you mentioned that the goal is to do that through Zoom, right? I would suggest adding to that Zoom meeting, perhaps, I'm trying to find a way that we can reach out to more families, because as we know, many of them do not use Zoom. I mean, their kids are in Zoom, but a lot of our parents don't know even how to use Zoom. We still have some internet issues, and so it might even our own school committee. So I believe that we need to go beyond that. So one initial thought that I had while you were presenting, perhaps we should reach out to the community-based organizations in Everett. We have few of them, as you know, and perhaps either having our family liaisons, have a meeting with them, or find a way to present in person, because some of those organizations are providing in-person services. But at least if we could inform those organizations, those staff members and volunteers of those organizations that serve our families in different ways, not in school, but in different ways, how it's going to be, this is what it is, provide them informational materials, so they could be, what I would say, our ambassadors to our families, explaining how the hybrid model would work. I strongly believe that we need to go beyond Zoom in order to provide this information to all families. So there's no family left behind, so they can make their own decision if they will continue to be on remote learning, which they have the right to, and they will, or if they want to go to hybrid, and what hybrid means for them. So, in a nutshell, I think we need to go beyond Zoom, and I'm thinking that perhaps the community-based organizations or even faith-based groups that we have in the city would be a great way to communicate to more families.
Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Murray?
So I had a question about parent choice. I know that it's every parent's choice to send their child back if we reopen hybrid, or stay remote until the end of the year if they so choose. And that's something that we've been really clear about. My question is, if a family signs up for hybrid and they realize that remote actually serviced their child better than hybrid did, or if they forego the right to go hybrid in the initial decision-making process, will they be able to opt in or out of the hybrid system once they've already committed, or is that a one-shot deal?
That's a great question. So you will always be able to opt out. And that can be on a rolling basis if that is what works best for a family. Opting in is going to be a little bit more challenging. When we, this plan has kind of changed over time because we keep kind of adjusting it as the year goes on. In an earlier version of this plan, we would have enrollment periods. So maybe if you had not opted into hybrid, but a month down the road, you did feel more comfortable or, you were ready, there would be sort of an enrollment period. As we get closer to the end of this year, it's harder to know if we're going to be able to offer like enrollment periods, but that was certainly part of our original plan. So because we would like to be able to honor families who still have not yet made that decision, or maybe trying to see how it's going to work. I just think with the amount of time we have left this school year, it may not work out the way we had originally planned.
Okay, are there any other questions of the superintendent? Ms. Cadillo. Ms. Cadillo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more question. Is it possible people are still very gun shy about this whole thing, especially if they haven't had their first or second shot yet, or can't take it for their own reasons, medical or whatever? Can we possibly use plexiglass around the teacher's desk area?
So we have not, we do have some plexiglass. We have not purchased or procured that on a very grand scale because of sort of the trade-offs with plexiglass as far as being another surface, another germ collection, and not necessarily providing, further protection. So, I mean, it's certainly something, again, I think that would be part of the conversation with the union. I don't know if, that, again, in a classroom, I'm just trying to figure out exactly how envisioning how that would work. But we can certainly, I'm sure the union will bring that up if they believe that that would be helpful.
I wasn't suggesting it, was just questioning as to whether we had looked into that at all.
We have, we looked into, and not a great deal of folks are using the plexiglass based on the sort of cost benefit, analysis of them. They do cost quite a bit of money for not necessarily the protection you're looking for. Again, it just becomes another surface that you're trying to clean when we're trying to move things out versus have additional things. So if anything, it's better for like greater face protection, face shields, things like that is what we've opted towards more versus, barriers. And especially in the hybrid model where you're kind of like, you may be doing both. Yeah, I mean, I haven't really, again, we've visited a lot of different places. I haven't really seen that in practice, but again, it's something we could explore.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, Superintendent, comment?
I wanted to bring up one last thing to Ms. Murray's point about if remote learning had better served their children. I did want to also just remind everyone, I know I've said this before, but I don't want it to go unsaid during this meeting, is that, remote learning will look different in this new environment. So it's not going to be exactly a complete comparison back and forth, but you'll get to see what remote learning looks like on the Wednesday, Thursday, or on the 3 days for your child. But the schedules are going to be slightly different based on the new hybrid schedule. So there is going to be a little bit of difference. So but you will be able to see what that difference is for your child based on the days that you are remote at home, if that makes sense.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, did you have any questions? Or you want to make a point?
No, first of all, I just want to say wonderful presentation, Madam Superintendent. I'm still not giving up hope. that we're able to, as the superintendent has stated, we are forming a standby vaccination list. I'm not giving up hope that the governor allows at least the city of Everett to do some sort of pilot that we could facilitate not only the 75 plus, 65 with 2 comorbidities, but also vaccinate our teachers, because we are running into situations when we're having our vaccination clinics that we do have ample spots open, that we could be, in essence, vaccinating teachers. So yeah, there's an article with Joan Vanocchi in the Globe is going to run tomorrow. You saw some articles in the State House News that we were all in. So there's some pressure to get teachers vaccinated, though a lot of the information the superintendent shared showing that school children really aren't a vector of spread, right? I mean, there is there are a lot of professionals and CDC are saying it's safe to open schools. I mean, but like Alan said earlier, I mean, who do you believe? They tell you one thing one time, they tell you something else another time, and how much information do they really have to say that schools aren't, school children aren't spreading to adults, So I can see the good thing is families who have children who don't want to send their kids don't have to. But there are children that I know are suffering from not being in school, and we all know that. And I think when this pandemic is over, we're going to see this. I mean, you saw the from the iReady from last year to this year. You saw the statistics that the superintendent has shown. And you know what, Superintendent, thank you to you and your staff for everything that you're doing, and all the information that you're sharing, the graphs, and all this data that's so important for us to make great decisions. Now, I don't know what we're going to do tonight as a group, it's the school committee, if we're going to be voting tonight, if we're going to lay this on the table a bit. And I mean, so I know, Madam Superintendent, you're going to have a conversation with the teachers union. I don't know, if the school committee votes that we go hybrid, is it regardless of what the teachers say, we go hybrid? No. So, yeah,
so no, this would be kind of charging orders as far as what the next steps in the negotiation would be.
Okay. So there's still a negotiation with the teachers, but this is just kind of us giving you, the superintendent, to say, go try to make it, try to negotiate with the teachers to get back to school and so forth.
Right, depending on which one of these methodologies you all feel is most appropriate. And I think you're absolutely right. Like I so much appreciate this conversation and the robust discussion and the questions, because I do feel like, we need everybody's input on this. It is hard to know. We've been hearing so many different things. You guys are the elected officials, the Everett residents. And I think it's really important for me to hear from all of you regarding what you think is the best plan, again, for Everett, because I think it does end up swinging many different ways, and we have to determine what the approach is best for us. I very much appreciate your point, though, about the fact that even if we were to choose option number 1, which gives us a timeline to return, I don't think that should change our, fervor in trying to get the educators the vaccination. And I really appreciate how much you've been advocating in order to do that and trying to use every different avenue to get even some educators in. So I really, really appreciate that. And thank you so much for that, Mayor, to you and your staff. So I don't want it to seem like, okay, we're doing one instead of the other. It's just about what are we going to kind of create a clear timeline at this point, or are we going to make it vaccine dependent, is really what I want to hear from all of you.
I mean, personally speaking, I think the harm that these children are going through is going to be more significant than if we were to go back to school and teachers go back to school. That's just my personal opinion. But I'm not a teacher going back into a classroom with a bunch of kids, right? Though if I had to, I would. If I had to prove a point to go into a classroom, during the next couple of months and be there with the teachers, I would. I think, we're gonna follow the guidelines. I know we're gonna have the hand sanitizer, the mask, the children wearing the, everyone's social distancing. I know, people are gonna say it's hard to keep second graders and first graders and kindergartens, apart. I get it. I understand. But I just see what these children are going through, the stories that I'm hearing. Some of these kids are home alone or their parents are at work. And I know it's no fault of the teachers, no fault of anyone. But it's a serious situation, and it's a hard choice. It's a hard decision, but I support going back to a hybrid class. If I had to take a vote, I support going back, and the sooner the better. And I know some of the teachers will probably be upset with me, and I hope they're not. But I've been working with food pantries with teachers and others, and I've been with the going into places of worship and going to the building every day and talking to residents. And I know it's different than being in a classroom and with kids, but I'm looking at the CDC guidelines and the information they're saying, and they're saying it's safe. So, it was easy shutting schools down, right? It was so easy. What an easy decision that was. Trying to get back is so difficult. So, thank you, Chairman Parker, and I look forward to. I have a text to the governor now asking if we could be that pilot community, allowing us to vaccinate 75 plus. What I went through. Hopefully, he says yes to that, and this can be almost a moot point. We get out those teachers who want to get vaccinated, get them vaccinated, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that one vaccine was. You said you said one vaccine gives people. Can you repeat that again?
After 2 weeks after the first vaccine, you're just about anywhere from 85 to 95% protected. The second vaccine is really just a booster shot.
Wow, that's great to know. So,
okay,
are we, Mr. Chairman? Are we taking a vote tonight on this?
Yes, that's the intent. So before I recognize two people that raised their hand, is there anybody who has spoken just once that would like to speak again?
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Are we gonna take a vote asking the superintendent to go with first step 1, step 2, step 3? How is that gonna?
Well, that's a matter for the party to decide. How the plan, and we'll do the negotiations. It will be the Committee on Finance and Negotiations. So
you broke
with
up.
that, Mrs. Murray, you had your hand up.
So this is more of a statement than a question. But I've heard both of my colleagues tonight, the mayor and Mr. Panarisi, talk about the frustrations of feeling let down by the CDC flip-flopping, the conflicting scientific information, the political morass we've found ourselves in, and who do you have faith in? Who do you have trust in? And I guess what I'm hoping tonight is that we can have faith in and have trust in our community. I'm hoping that together we can make the best of a situation that none of us wants to be in and none of us asked for, and rally around each other to keep our most vulnerable population safe, and at the same time provide them with everything they need in order to continue to grow and learn and be. And it makes me sad, honestly, that at the state and the federal level, leadership has been lacking. And it makes me sad that science has become politicized. And it makes me sad and frustrated that, we've been left to our own devices for so much of this pandemic. And it's ended up a situation where when we do come up with solutions, they get scuttled. But I do have faith, and I have faith in my colleagues here tonight. I have faith in the administration. I have faith in the teachers. I have faith in the parents. And I just think, it's a matter of personal responsibility. I think everyone is going to have to step up to the plate to make hybrid work. I think the parents are going to have to take their responsibility for making sure that their children are going to follow protocols and be safe in the classroom and keep their peers safe in the classroom and keep their teachers safe in the classroom. I think it's going to be up to the teachers to make sure that they observe the protocols and that they use their best judgment and personal responsibility to enforce masking, to keep windows open even when it's chilly, to make sure that they're cleaning off surfaces. I think it's going to be up to the administration to be going around and making sure that the teachers have what they need in order to make this work. I think it's going to be up to the central office administration to make sure that we're listening to buildings and that buildings are supported in the best possible way. And I think it's going to be up to us and city government to make sure that we're giving our schools everything that we need to give them in order for them to be safe, meaningful places for our children and families, whether they're choosing remote or they're choosing in person. And so to that end, I don't know if that's, I don't mean that to be a soapbox, but I really truly believe that Everett is at its best when our backs are against the wall. And I believe that if we can't have faith in the outside systems, at least we can have faith in each other. And I'd like to find a way back there. I think there's been too much division and too much not assuming best intentions from all parties involved. And we have to get away from that. And we have to be one again. We have to be Everett's best. And it's only in that that we can really, truly move forward and trust. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Lambert.
Well said, Mrs. Murray. There are no easy answers, but I did have another question. If we vote tonight, is this just for the beginning? Because again, I do have concerns when it comes to middle school and high school specifically. And I almost feel like it's two different decisions based on, none of us are epidemiologists. I think Mr. Panarisi is the closest health professional we have. But we've all done a lot of reading, a lot of research, and I still have concerns there. Can we treat it as two separate, or is that a matter for negotiations?
I think that would be a matter for negotiations because that's part of the vaccine rollout and what we're, unless there, you know, there was a different version of the plan that you wanted to put forward. But I think, again, it depends on which plan is chosen. And then I think that would be part of the negotiations for the teachers union to determine what priorities they think would be best. And that would happen in that conversation with the subcommittee for the finance and negotiation. So still, you all would be part of that, but I think it would happen sort of after we've decided if it's vaccine dependent or not.
So could we, even if it was just at the high school level, make a piece of it vaccine dependent or no?
If you all wanted to split it, I'd like you guys like take it in pieces, or I think there is always the option to do that, is my understanding.
Because in my leaning, right, and it's changed multiple times, but again, is if we can require pool testing. This is the thing. If we can require pool testing and make the older grades more vaccine dependent on the timeline, that's where I'm leaning. That's where my comfort level is. I just don't know how that plays out in what we decide tonight, or do we just move on to negotiations and then the finance and negotiation subcommittee makes a recommendation for approval.
So if I can from the chair. So if the body voted on plan 1, 2, or 3 tonight, the recommendation, I believe, would be to refer the matter to between finance and negotiation.
Mr. Chairman, your sound goes up and off, on and off, on and off.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay. So if the body was to make a recommendation to pursue Plan 1, 2, or 3, I would envision that this would go to the Committee on Finance and Negotiations. That committee, along with the administration, would negotiate some type of memorandum of understanding with the union, which then would come back to this body that would have to be approved by the school committee. And then the plan would be put into action. So, I mean, all that would certainly take time, especially when you're looking at March 8th. We have everybody report from a staff standpoint onto the buildings. That's somewhat aggressive. Thoughts or comments? Would agree, disagree on that statement? Or Mrs. Lambert, you still have the floor.
So I guess so we can request modifications as a body tonight for the finance and negotiations team and the administration to take into account, or do you make it in a formal motion to add a fourth plan, which isn't really, that's kind of my question is.
I think the matter before us is to approve a plan, and we're not approving the plan, we are approving a plan for negotiations. So with that, things are flexible, such as the matter, the concerns that you have.
Thank you.
You all set? Okay, Mrs. Murray?
So I just wanted to clarify that given my understanding is whatever plan we put out tonight is going to be dependent on negotiations and impact bargaining with the union, and then whatever unforeseen things may happen between now and the time of the rollout. And in addition to that, is it not also true that the slow phased in approach allows us to make modifications and recommendations and changes as we go forward? So we're not, even if the plan were to go exactly the way we voted it tonight, over the next weeks and months, adjustments can still be made in real time, that this is sort of a living document rather than something set in concrete. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
I would agree with that statement. I think that's mentioned in the past, plus the fact that the plan would be scalable, kind of no pun intended, but taken in doses. I mean, what if all of a sudden, there's another surge? I mean, we don't continue with the plan, we go back and we shut down schools. So the ideal plan would be a phased approach, comes in stages, and that would be nimble and be able to quickly react to what the situations might be. So if I can, as from the chair, if I can ask the superintendent a couple of questions. So each plan says on March 8th, staff returns to the building. What's expected, or what will happen that week? Will it be our professional development, training on a hybrid mode, while also servicing a remote community?
Yes, and again, all subject to negotiation, but we would want to make sure that teachers are prepared to accept the students, that the classrooms do look exactly as they want them to. We are still figuring out the professional development portion of it, because there is an option to do the 2 days because you all approved that, or another option to have it be more asynchronous, to be done at a different time. So we're, again, since different teachers may be phasing in at different times and may want to access that professional development at a different time when they're about to enter hybrid versus, so we're in those conversations about what would be the best utilization of that time, but we definitely know that we would need teachers in to be testing the technology, making sure that they were getting used to it. We wouldn't want it to be that the teachers came in at the same day as the students.
Okay. So then with that, estimated start time would be the week of the 15th of March. Mm-hmm. Who would be starting on the 15th of March? The subgroups?
Our special education students. And
okay.
Then, yes.
Okay, so then the following week, the 22nd, we would bring in another group.
K-2.
K-2. And then on the 29th, if we were to keep on moving forward, that would be
3-5. We are still in conversations with the high school about what would be the best scale in for them.
Okay.
Because we want to have some students scaling in. Originally, we thought that would be seniors, but again, depending on the negotiations and Ms. Lambert's point, maybe that would end up not being something we did.
Okay, so the point of laying that out was that if you count this week, the 8th is 4 weeks away. SPED will arrive in 5, K-12 in 6 weeks, 3 to 5 in 7, and then it's to be determined thereafter. That's 8 weeks. That's 2 months. That's 2 months of vaccine distributions. That's, the next phase, or whatever it might be, greater availability. The pipeline becomes more secure. It becomes more efficient, more adequate, more quicker. So those are the things that, going back to the earlier questions as far as being flexible and nimble, those are the things that they'll take into account over the next 8 weeks as far as how this plan continues. In 8 weeks, do we add the high school or don't we? So I just wanted to point that out from a timeline standpoint, because as we talk and negotiate and continue and phase in, more and more people are getting vaccinations, especially in this community where the fear is it's multi-generational. We know that if they want to, if you're 75 or older, go down the Pope John, you can get it. If you're 65, and those staff members that might have concerns about elderly parents, and I do feel for that, their parents now have a chance to get those vaccinations. So that's the point that I wanted to make. I just wanted to about the timeline, and I do see Mr. Barros.
Mr. Chairman, to your point and to the mayor's point, I'm hopeful. I believe that by approving a plan, I read a press release today that came out of the governor's office, which the mayor mentioned that he's in conversation with the governor. The big administration is sent out a press release today prioritizing 20 hard hit communities, and Everett is part of it, right, Mr. Mayor? And which will include vaccines, outreach to diverse communities, a series of things that I was delighted when I saw that Everett was part of those communities that the governor will continue to invest, and will invest even more. So I'm hopeful that, as the mayor was saying, with the vaccines and other initiatives that are happening around the vaccinations that the big administration announced today, and Everett being part of it, that we're going to be able to move forward with this, tiered reentry plan. So as the mayor mentioned, as all of us have been hearing the same thing from different parents and who are, just desperate that their kids, they want their kids back to school. So on the safe side, for our teachers, which is extremely important, and all of our staff members, even to Ms. Lambert's point, perhaps the seniors at the high school, with this announcement from the governor's office today, as Everett being one of priorities, in terms of communities, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move forward with a safe hybrid returning.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Ladies and gentlemen, open the floor for a motion.
I'll make a motion to begin negotiations, refer to the Subcommittee on Finance and Negotiations on the Plan 1.
I'll second that motion.
Second the motion.
Okay, on the motion, any questions, any discussion? Ms. Cadillo.
Mr. Chairman, we're just voting on Plan 1, not, are we taking them all separately or?
I'm doing as the body would wish. And right now, there's only one motion before us.
Okay.
That's to accept, to recommend Plan 1, referring it to the Committee on Finance and Negotiation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other, or hearing no other questions or comments, I would ask for a roll call vote. So if you're voting yay or nay, a yes vote means that you are in favor, moving for favorable action on referring Plan 1 to the Committee on Finance and Negotiations. Roll call vote.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor De Maria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
No.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
No.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. So we have 7 yeas and 2 nays. We have referred the matter to the Committee on Finance and Negotiations. Madam Superintendent, the next order of business, please.
Thank you so much. So that was item number 2 as well, the request approval of a revised school reopening plan. This isn't the official reopening plan, which would be in the form of the MOU after we discuss the after we have the negotiations with the school, the ETA, and then have an actual revised reopening plan to provide. So,
which then will be presented to the school committee for its final vote.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So item number 3 is to request approval of the Malden transportation contract extension. So this extension request amends the current contract from June 2023 to 2024, and the contract would honor all the current terms and keep the 2021 rates constant through this extended term.
Okay. I need a motion.
Motion for favorable action.
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion for us for favorable action. I'll ask if there's any questions or comments on the matter. Okay, seeing none from the chair, if I could just ask, earlier this year, we amended the existing contract for this year to continue to pay or provide invoices at 60%. That is still the intent toward the end of this year, correct? Because Mr. Morris did call me and explain that he did receive some stimulus money, which basically just covered about 4 weeks of payroll. Because the thinking was back when the amendment was made to the contract, it might be something bigger and more. So we just wanted to be transparent, bring that to our attention. For our support. So the 60% is not before us. That's going to be ongoing for the end of the year. So the motion is made and seconded to extend the contract by 1 year. There's a rollover factor in the contract. So with that, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor De Maria? Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes, 8 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. You have approved the contract extension. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you so much. So item number 4 is a request for acceptance of 2 grants. The first is the state appropriation for the COVID prevention Fund for $500,500. So this is a state authorized grant that provides for each district to receive a grant equal to $25 multiplied by their 2021 foundation enrollment, plus $75 multiplied by their low income enrollment. The second grant is an Everett Citizens Foundation grant awarded to the Webster Extension for gross motor growth for $4,861.75.
Move to accept.
Second.
Second.
I'd be a lot more comfortable if someone said, like, make a motion to take items 4A.
Make a motion to accept the grants. Both grants.
Collectively.
Keep going in and out, Frank. It's every other syllable.
I'd recommend from the chair, we either vote on them separately or make a motion, amend the motion to take the items collectively.
Okay, we can move to take them collectively.
All right, thank you.
Items number A and B of item number 4.
Thank you. So the motion before us is to take items 4A and B collectively and move for favorable action. Roll call, please.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DeMaria? Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi? Mr. Panarisi? You're muted.
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. 8 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. We have accepted both grants. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. Item number 5 on the agenda is to request acceptance of a donation from Richard Mangerian in the amount of $100 for the Parlin School. We'd also like to thank him for his contribution and provide a letter of thanks.
I'll make a motion to accept the donation and send a letter of thanks to Mr. Mangerian.
A second.
Motion was made and seconded to accept the donation of former long-term Everett Public Schools employee, submaster, principal. So can I have a roll call vote?
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DeMaria? Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. 9 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. You accepted the donation from Mr. Mangian. Madam Superintendent.
Thank
Order of
you.
business.
That brings us to the next order of business, Roman numeral 6, which is items submitted by school committee members. Number 1 is the survey for EHS alumni through Naviance for contact data regarding post-high school experiences submitted by Ms. Lambert.
Ms. Lambert?
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask the administration as well as Everett High School guidance and building staff if we could put some energy towards surveying our alumni. I know we don't have that much data through Naviance, but we have a few years now where we could contact them, ask them about their post-high school experience, because it was, you know, pre-COVID, so it feels like a million years ago. But right before, we had discussed, although we have high numbers of students that move into post-high school educational, higher ed, or trade experiences, the completion rate is not always what we want it to be. I think in surveying that and understanding and possibly even coming up with like a student alumni advisory group we can inform decisions we're making in our lower grades, whether middle school and high school, that can help us better prepare our students to not just move on to those institutions, but to successfully complete them. Because there's nothing worse than taking out a loan and not having the benefits of it. So if I could make a motion to refer that to the Everett High School principal and guidance staff with a report back on success rate.
Second.
Mr. Aprizay?
Yes.
I lost my screen. Would you mind taking the meeting from this point?
Sure. Sure. So we have a motion made and seconded to refer this matter to high school principal and guidance department. Did I see a hand? No? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
9 in the affirmative. Motion passes. Back to you, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. So number 2 is a request for data on PTO fundraising and uses by school to assess ways we can support equity and enrichment activities through the upcoming budget process submitted by Ms. Lambert.
I can go ahead.
Ms. Lambert, you have the floor.
Thank you. So this really came about, I'm just hoping that ahead of budgeting season, we can understand what enrichment activities are financed through PTO. As we know, that can vary school to school within the district, and just to make sure that we're providing equitable resources and can possibly supplement that through the budget process or look at another. So I'm not sure if that would be a motion to the data coordinator, or would a report back from building principals be?
Ms. Cardello.
Thank you. If I may, just a suggestion, something like that, perhaps we could refer that to the Finance and Negotiations Committee and invite like a PTO representative to come and speak to us and give us some idea of what they're doing and what they may need help with, because they know they do a lot of fundraising and they go to different organizations to raise funds to do the things that they do within, you know, their school. So I think if we get involved with that, sometimes I know the principals know what goes on. So if you'd want to invite a principal as well, but I think like maybe the head of each PTO to come and speak on their specific school. How you feel about that?
Ms. Lambert?
I was more looking for a report back as far as policy, what, you know, our field trips financed through PTO, and then what, you know, so it was more or less about policy. I know the high school has a different setup than necessarily the elementary schools or the K-8 schools. So it was more just understanding what activities are financed and how, you know, how that's, so that we can then look at whether there needs to be, because I'm not saying that there is an inequity. I'm basically looking to see if there is.
So you want to get the data from all the PTOs
on what it's used for.
Okay. And how would you like to go about doing that? Madam Superintendent, maybe you can help us.
Thank you.
Yes. If I could make a suggestion, we could certainly coordinate that on our end. If it was referred to our finance and budget team, to our CFO, who could then sort of outline what are the permissible uses for PTO funds, how have we used them historically, maybe suggestions for using them in the future, but then also a breakdown of what our PTO funds look like, and we can work with the principals to do that.
Okay, so I will make that in the form of a motion to refer that to our chief financial officer to gather the data on historical uses, allowable uses, as well as recommendations from the CFO.
A second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to refer this matter to our CFO to basically get historical perspective and the present perspective as to fundraising and how the PTO has spent their money and can spend their money. Roll call vote, please, Addie.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
9 in the affirmative, motion passes.
Thank you so much. So item number 3 is per Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 38M. The school committee designates a student outreach coordinator, and this is submitted by Chairman Parker.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Parker.
Okay, for some reason I still got audio connection, but I don't have the visuals, so I'm still trying to figure it out. So on this piece, I would make a motion to move favorable action. Mr. Corey McCarthy, Vice Principal of Everett High School, as the student outreach coordinator.
I'll second the motion.
You sort of broke up a little bit off and on there. Who were you nominating?
Mr. Corey McCarthy, Vice Principal of Everett High School.
And that was seconded by Mr. Barrows.
So point of clarification, what are we doing, Mr. Chairman?
We are appointing, designating a student outreach coordinator.
And what is this coordinator gonna? What is this person gonna do?
What does this function entail, Mr. Chairman?
Okay, so can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So
we can also see you, Mr. Parker.
You can.
Yes.
All right.
I figured I'd give you a heads up along those lines.
Okay. Thank you. It's telling me don't Zoom alone, but yet I'm alone. So Mr. Mayor, back in 2019, we as a body approved this Chapter 71, Section 38M, which allows for a student representative to act in an ex officio capacity on the school committee. And we put into motion early last year in 2020, and then it fell out with them with the COVID. So we're readdressing that. And soon there will be a student representative at our regular meetings acting in an ex officio capacity in accordance with this chapter. Within the chapter, it also says that we should designate a student outreach coordinator, and that also the school committee should meet on a quarterly basis. The student group, I can't think of the name at the moment.
Student advisory.
Student advisory group on a quarterly basis. So what I'm asking tonight is that we nominate Mr. Corey McCarthy, Vice Principal, who's basically acting in that role anyway as the student outreach coordinator.
And what is he going to do?
He is going to be the facilitator of the student advisory committee, mentoring, providing guidance, helping them, and also establishing that ex officio role as far as who those people will be, and will participate also in the quarterly meetings.
Ms. Lambert.
Also, one of the functions is to keep the student advisory group apprised of our agendas so that they're aware of what's going on and can solicit input.
And Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Barrows.
On that note, I am already in conversation with Mr. Norman and Mr. McCarty to move ahead with bringing the student who will be representing that advisory council in our meetings. So both of them are on the loop. Mr. Norman and Mr. McCarty, I've been working with both of them.
Thank you, Mr. Barrows. So before us, we have a motion to designate Mr. Corey McCarthy, Vice Principal of Everett High School, as the Student Outreach Coordinator. Roll call vote, please, Addie.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria? Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. We have 8 in the affirmative. The motion passes.
Thank you so much. So Roman numeral 8 are bills and payrolls.
Are we skipping the subcommittee report?
I'm sorry.
Roman
numeral 7.
I was just checking.
Sorry, Roman numeral 7 is the subcommittee report. We did have a subcommittee meeting on the Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity subcommittee, which met on Wednesday, February 10th at 6:30 p.m.
Mr. Barrows.
Thank you, Mr. Abraze. We met last week as a subcommittee. Was a terrific meeting. I want to thank members of the subcommittee, Mrs. Murray and Mrs. Lambert. Also, I want to thank the superintendent and her team who joined the meeting, along with the principals of the Devon School, Dr. Wallace, Mr. Barrett, the principal of the Webster High School, but especially our parents and our family liaisons who joined us as well. We had the leadership team, or I should say the leadership parents of our CPAC, the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, that are all the members that are part of the CPAC as well. But we had 2 representatives who joined us, and we had our family liaisons who spoke on behalf of parents, who provided testimony to them. And the goal of the subcommittee was to hear from parents especially, what their experience right now, what is the experience with our hybrid model or hybrid learning, but also their thoughts on, actually, let me go back a little bit. Their experience with remote learning right now and their thoughts on going back to school on a hybrid model. We heard from both parents who were there from the CPAC, but also we heard from parents whose kids are in our English Learners Program. The director of our English Learner Department, Mrs. Auger, joined us. Also, the director of our special ed program, Mr. Donahue, joined us as well. It was a very good discussion. We heard from parents with their difficulties with the current remote learning, especially for kids who are starting to learn English now, parents who have limited English proficiency as well in communicating with teachers. But also the difficulties that many, not all, but many of our kids in our special education program facing now. Difficulties with classes through Zoom. They believe that their kids are falling behind. Of course, we heard those parents, but we know that there are many different opinions out there, different emotions. We couldn't hear 5,000 or 7,000 parents, but we're very thankful for those who joined us and spoke up. It was, I'm sure, very useful for the superintendent as she developed her plan for the hybrid, but also our current remote learning. And the goal was really to provide an opportunity for those parents to speak up so we could hear their opinions. The committee was not siding with, or the subcommittee was not siding with one side or the other side. We just invited those parents, especially from those programs, English learners and special ed, to talk to us, and so we could hear their thoughts and their concerns. That's in a nutshell. It's just for informational purposes. I'm wondering if, through you, Mr. Chairman, if Mrs. Murray or Mrs. Lambert have anything to add.
Well, from the chair, I can add. I was an observer, and I
was about to mention that.
I just,
you're there as well.
How soon they forget, but it was. Let's put it this way: any doubt in my mind about going along with the superintendent's plan, that night cinched it for me, because I thought the parents were extremely persuasive, emotional at times. It was a very moving meeting, and there were some powerful and some sad stories about some of the kids, like you said, some of the English language students who had sort of taken a step back, and they felt that they really, sooner rather than later, feel the students have to get to school. And it was a terrific meeting. I would expect nothing less from Chairman Barrows. But anyone else want to add? Ms. Murray, go ahead.
So, like the chair, I was incredibly moved and impressed with the articulation of the experiences of the parents who shared with us, both in their written testimony and in the parents who spoke to us directly from the CPAC. It also opened conversation and dialogue between myself and parents via email. I got a lot more emails from parents about going hybrid. And like I said before, parents who are choosing to stay remote that want to make sure that their children aren't stigmatized for staying remote, and children that are choosing to go hybrid who want to make sure that their children aren't stigmatized for going hybrid, and also just the struggles that all of our families, I even heard from the parents of students in our system who are also educators. And, for as many emails as I got were as many opinions as I got. And at the end of the day, all we can do is give people as many options as they can to make what's best for their family's decisions. And at the same time, protecting our teaching population and our educators to the best of our ability, because no children are going to be serviced well by a fleet of ill teachers. So I think that regardless, I think there are going to be a lot of hard feelings out there tonight, regardless of where people fell on the choices of the plans, but rallying together and listening to the families and what the families need, and listening to the educators and what the educators need, in order for all of us to help make this as safe a transition as possible, I think is, for me, the most valuable next step, along with, again, applauding both the superintendent and the mayor for continuing to vigorously pursue vaccines. I really wanted to wait for a vaccination. I'm very nervous about putting my faith in political systems outside of the city of Everett right now, which is why I voted the way I voted. But I do have faith in Superintendent Tahiliani and in Mayor DiMaria. So that's where I stand. And I think that our parents feel the same way. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, do the other members get notices of subcommittees? Or is it just the people who are on the subcommittee? Because I'm not on any subcommittees. I don't think I can be. I think, Frank, is that something you said that? I don't think I can be on subcommittees, which I don't know why, but can I just get noticed of all the committees? Because I would like to attend the DEI committee for one committee. So I don't know who sets the agendas up and who sends the notices out, but if I could get notice of those, just even to have on my calendar, so if I could attend, I'd like to attend. Thank you.
Absolutely. Usually what happens, obviously the subcommittee members get, but everyone else should get invited.
I haven't gone invited, so if I probably just say whatever. If I can get invited, I'd appreciate it.
You will. Make sure of it.
Thank you.
Ms. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for Mr. Barrows for chairing that, because I think all of us, there were some feelings after our subcommittee meeting, and it wasn't to persuade anybody of anything.
We're losing you, Ms. Lambert. We've lost you. We can see Frank and we can't hear you.
I'm back. I think she's having the same microphone problems with the laptop that I am.
You're back.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you, yes. Go ahead, Mr. Parker, you're back.
I'm back.
So our goal pre-COVID was to bring as many chairs to the table as possible. And that continues to be the goal. So it wasn't to persuade anybody, it was to hear everybody. And I think that's the mission of our committee as a whole. I heard it put beautifully by someone just a few weeks ago. It said, stop saying give students a voice. They already have a voice. You need to listen to them. And I feel the same way for our parents who haven't always historically felt listened to or don't know the avenue to listen. And we're giving them that, and we're continuing to expand ways that they can. So I truly appreciate that subcommittee. And I look forward to hearing more voices in different ways, in native languages. I've enjoyed when it has to be interpreted to me, because the passion and the eloquence when somebody speaks confidently in their native language is amazing. And you, without even understanding all of the words, you understand the message. So thank you again to all those parents, our CPAC, our EL parents, our family liaisons, for being brave enough to speak, and for all those who gave an avenue to speak.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Parker, are you back, or I'll recognize Ms. Cardello?
Thank you. We're done with that piece, correct? The equity piece?
That was for informational purposes, correct?
Right. I just want to mention that today is Mayor Carlo DiMaria's birthday, and I thank him for spending it with us. That's very nice of you, Mr. Mayor.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Hey.
Happy birthday.
Aniversário. That's happy birthday in Portuguese.
What's that, Marconi?
Feliz aniversário. That's happy birthday in Portuguese.
Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Item number 8 is, or well, actually, before we go on, I did just want to say too that the creation of that subcommittee was a great idea, but I really do believe that in practice, it's even better than it was in theory. And I think everybody already said everything I would have said, but I just wanted to thank and applaud everybody who attended and spoke that night. So item number 8 is bills and payrolls.
Thank you. I will make a motion to approve bills and payrolls in the amount of $1,739,280.93.
Second.
Okay, motion is made and seconded to approve bills and payrolls in the amount of $1,739,280.93. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. 9 in the affirmative. You have approved.
Thank you so much. So there are no items under the next. Oh, sorry.
Hold on. There's one more part of that.
I make a motion
every time.
I make a motion to pay bills and payroll in the amount of $1,739,280.93.
Second.
Okay, motion is made and seconded to pay bills and payrolls in the amount of $1,739,280.93. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. 9 in the negative. I'm sorry. 9 in the positive. You have approved payment. Next item of business, please.
Yes. So as we have no items under unfinished business, new business, or hearings, I'm going to move on to Roman numeral 11, which is matters for executive session. We have just one item, which is to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A. I would like to actually make a motion to lay this on the table as a special birthday gift to Mayor DiMaria. I'm just kidding, actually. So the union has asked that we lay this on the table as they have new a new field representative, and so they still they would like to get that person oriented before moving on with this executive session.
I'll move to lay the executive session item on the table. So for the notice.
Second.
Second.
Okay, motion is made and seconded to lay the item on the table. Questions, debate? Roll call vote, please.
Mr.
Lay on the
Abraze?
table.
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. 9 in the affirmative. You have laid this matter on the table.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion is made and seconded for adjournment. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Abraze?
Yes.
Mr. Barrows?
Yes.
Mayor DiMaria?
Yes.
Ms. Cardello?
Yes.
Ms. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. LaMonica?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Panarisi?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes, 9 in the affirmative. We have adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you and happy birthday.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Happy
Birthday,
birthday.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.